and the light of thy sword from the graves of our slain shall thy valor prevail as we greet thee again. Hail, liberty! Hail! Punjab, one of the few states that at the height of the British power in India in 1845 still fought for freedom. Ranjit Singh carved out the state of Punjab, which extended 600 miles from Tibet and Kashmir in the north to Sindh in the south. It extended 350 miles across the plains of North Punjab. South of the Satluj were the states directly controlled by the British and the princely states which had accepted the British protectorate. With Britain's interest in the Great Game in Afghanistan, so far they had maintained a status quo with Ranjit Singh, and there had been no trial of strength. Ranjit Singh had ruled with an iron hand, and there were generous awards for bravery, loyalty, and steadfastness. Strangely enough, the senior commanders in the Sikh armies in the Anglo Sikh War had earned their spurs during Ranjit Singh's time. Tej Singh, a Jat from Meerut, rose to the rank of general in 1819 and was rewarded for his valuable services against the Afghans at Mankera and Dirjat in Kashmir before being made the governor of Peshawar. Gulab Singh, a Dogra, who was rewarded for his brilliant work in the campaigns of Multan in 1816, Dera Ghazi Khan, and the Battle of Shahid. He also put down the revolt organized by the fanatic Muslim preacher Sayyid Ahmad. Lal Singh, a Brahman who worked his way up in the administration from being the Munshi of Lahore to becoming the revenue collector of Kashmir and finally the treasurer of Lahore. He was made the Raja of Rohtas and Dumelia. Strangely, none of the above chosen by him were Sikhs or Punjabis, and eventually all of them turned out to be soldiers of fortune. Bought in the changed circumstances by the highest bidder. Therefore, the question now is not how the British won the Anglo Sikh War, but how the armies, directed by these traitors, fought so splendidly. The fact is that there was a period of instability after Ranjit Singh's death. His sons Khadak Singh and Naunihal Singh died within a short time frame and left Sher Singh to rule, who was not an effective ruler. The state had changed. With a boy king in Dilip Singh and Maharani Jinder Kaur, Ranjit Singh's fourth wife at the helm, the power equation was at best tenuous. With a weak ruler, the power over the army shifted from the court to the panchayats of the soldiery. The ruler then started paying handsome bribes to the army leadership in return for their support, only to be discarded when another ambitious individual paid more. The army became stronger and drained the government of its exchequer. Their pays were twice those of their counterparts in the British Army. Earlier, with a firm leadership, control of the army would have been wrested from these panchayats by the generals. However, with little loyalty to the state, the generals chose the safety of the British rule, which at that time seemed a much more attractive option. Both Tej Singh and Gulab Singh had already written to the Governor General that Punjab should be invaded. The clarion call was sounded by the Sikh army when it crossed south of the Satluj on 11th December and divided itself into 5 divisions. 2 divisions had been left behind in Punjab at Peshawar and Lahore. 3 were south of the Satluj. Tej Singh was at Firozpur, Lal Singh at Firoz Shah, and a static holding fort at Philor Fort was under Ranjit Singh. The British took immediate cognizance of this, and the Commander-in-Chief, Viscount Gough, was told to mobilize the army. Gough set out from Ambala for Firozpur on the 12th of December and marched the 120 miles to Sirak near Bhagapurana on the 17th of December, averaging approximately 21 miles a day. He already had news of the Sikh army at Mudki and on 18th December ordered the last few miles to Mudki in battle order. Mudki was a substantial village composed of 600 houses with a marketplace and shops and a population of approximately 4,000 people with several substantial havelis. The village lake, with a limited capacity, was adjacent to the fort. The fort was usually held by a garrison of 160 Sikh soldiers. The Sikh Deployment. The Sikh army, on the other hand, only had to move 10 kilometers from Firoz Shah and was absolutely fresh. In Captain Nicholson's correspondence, using information supplied by the Sikh commanders, there was a 3,500 strong Sikh contingent with a cavalry force of 1,500 personnel. Lal Singh had brought only 22 guns, out of which 4 were howitzers. The British already had news of the Sikh move, and at Sirak, Gough had sent cavalry and infantry ahead of the main column as skirmishers, and the army moved in constant readiness. The bulk of the British forces started drifting into Mudki at around 1500 hours, and the vedettes had already signalled the proximity of the Sikh forces. After a hot march from Sirak, the units struggled in and headed straight to the village lake to quench their thirst, and soon the followers of the leading units arrived, and with that started the establishment of the camp and the looting of the village. No engagements had taken place, and when the British vedettes reported the proximity of the Sikh army, Gough was genuinely surprised. The British troops had not eaten and were not really well rested, but Gough decided to give battle anyway. West of Mudki were cultivated cornfields all along with loose ploughed earth, with boundaries of the fields marked with thorny hedges. A kikar jungle ran northeast to southwest, just south of Loham. There were a number of sandy hills which obstructed the otherwise flat country. The jungle, too, had a number of hillocks. Most of the dust raised in the positioning of the Sikh army had settled by 1400 hours. But with the positioning of the British forces consisting of 42 guns and 12,350 soldiers sent huge plumes of dust in the air as they moved forward to their positions, and therefore identifying the weight of the attack was easy. Relative strengths. The British had a staggering advantage in cavalry, infantry, and guns over the Sikh forces, which can be seen from the figures projected. So it was basically 3,500 Sikh warriors against 15,000 British troops, which included 3,850 Europeans. This gave the British a 5-1 superiority over the Sikhs. The Sikh Deployment. The Sikh army had started deploying at Loham, both north and south of the road, at approximately 1000 hours. The 16 horsed artillery guns were in subunits of 4 and deployed in the front line with the howitzers in depth. The 4 infantry battalions were deployed with the Fauj-e Khas in the center, and the other 3 units deployed alongside. The cavalry components were on the flanks, along with the Ghurcharas and irregular cavalry. They spilt over onto the flanks, causing some concern to the British forces. Taking their place alongside in depth among the hillocks was an in-depth line of Sikh snipers and was subsequently to take a very heavy toll on the English in the ensuing battle, as they turned out to be tenacious fighters by day as also by night. Gough's plan was as follows. Firstly, use the right flank to lead the attack. So 1st Division under Smith, with the brigades of Wheeler and Bolton, were placed in the north of the road to Jaid. These also had cavalry brigades of Brigadiers White and Gough. Secondly, the centre was between the road to Sarawali and Jaid and was Gilbert's division. This had only 2 brigades and was part of the holding force. The 3rd Division under General McCaskill, south of the road to Jaid Mudki, was the second part of the holding force with 2 brigades, in addition to McTyre's cavalry brigade. The European regiments were placed by Gough bolster the flanks. Her Majesty's 9th Foot and 31st Foot were placed on either flank, with the 3rd Light Dragoons attacking on the northern flank. The Sepoy regiments held the middle. Our very own Skinner's horse, 5th Bengal Cavalry, took part in this action against the Sikh force at Mudki. The British had a 5-1 advantage in infantry and plenty of depth in their attack. At 1500 hours, the 5 troops of horsed artillery under Colonel Brooke and the 2 field batteries moved into position to support the attack. The 2 cavalry brigades of White and Gough moved to the right flank, whilst the 3rd Brigade under McTyre moved to the left flank of the artillery. At 1600 hours, the artillery duel between the 2 armies opened up, and as the cannonade commenced, Lal Singh fled the battlefield and left the Sikh troops leaderless. Major Todd of the horsed artillery was one of the first casualties when his head was blown off by a cannonball and his body carried off the battlefield. Although the English guns had a 2-1 advantage, they did not make an appreciable impact on the battlefield. The superiority of the Sikh gunners was immediately seen, and for every 2 rounds the British fired, the Sikhs were able to fire 3, and with a much greater accuracy too. At 1700 hours, the British cavalry moved forward on both flanks. The charge was sounded, and they made whatever speed they could through the brush and jungle. By 1800 hours, the Sikh cavalry heavily outnumbered and were pushed back. They partly withdrew, and quite a few refused and joined the Sikh infantry in the defensive battle. The British horsed cavalry now moved north and south of Loham, causing maximum damage with enfilade fire. However, by last light, the British cavalry could not advance any further, and an entire encirclement was prevented. The cavalry was withdrawn by 1900 hours, and it became entirely an infantry battle. This time, the Sikh snipers took a very heavy toll on the battle. By 2000 hours, it was absolutely dark, and Gough ordered the right flank to move forward in echelon formation. The Sikh troops were well marshalled and formed squares as the British troops pushed forward in the darkness, trying to stay in assault formation whilst advancing through the thorny bushes. The Sikh gunners too continued to fight and held their fire in the darkness and opened up at only 20 yards to wreak havoc on the British. The battle turned out to be a series of hard-fought skirmishes along the length of the jungle. Some of the assaulting infantry got detached from their parent units and attached themselves to any nearby unit. Dr. Werner Hofmeister, a Prussian physician present in the battle, said the Sikh unit had charged 3 times at a British unit in the attack, but had been unable to break the attack due to sheer numbers. By 2200 hours, the Sikh units had started withdrawing towards Loham. This time saw some very desperate fighting between the Sikh gunners and the British infantry. The Sikh gunners lost their guns and recaptured them on several occasions. By midnight, the battle was over. However, Sikhs were found lying well beyond the village of Loham. The British finally returned to Mudki at around 2 a.m. and throughout this time, the Sikh snipers continued their attrition. Mudki was not really a battle. It was not even a test of strength. The size of the contingent Lal Singh had chosen was larger than Iraqi in force, but certainly not large enough to give battle successfully. The force, therefore, could not defeat the British, and nor was it mobile enough to draw the British into a chosen area of battle. It was at best an engagement that showed the Sikhs' ability to combat heavy odds and disengage successfully, as also that the army had enough staunch backing of the villagers and the disdain they had for their British intruders. There is no doubt that this small fraction of the Sikh army, which gave battle to the bulk of the British army at Mudki, had showed the courage and tenacity to win. The British knew the battles ahead were not going to be a cakewalk. The battle had shown that despite the discipline and organization of a modern army, the Sikh soldier still had the tenacity to fight and had the confidence and ability to hold on. It also showed that despite buying out the treacherous Lal Singh and ensuring no higher direction of war on ground, the troops were innovators, motivated, and were no pushover. The myth that the Sixth Army had been broken after Ranjit Singh's death was set to rest. The Sikhs were fighters and remained so. And lastly, the people of Punjab themselves remained firmly behind their soldiers and were hostile to the British forces. They helped their army during the battle, and after the fighting helped the wounded too. They had a disdain for the British troops, and fighting in Punjab was not going to be easy. As far as the British were concerned, they had set their minds on Punjab, and they could not afford to lose.